Now I've got myself unmuted. What's up, folks? This is Tony Brewer. You're listening to or watching, as the case may be, Cogitations. Cogitations? No, this is Christianity Now. I'm all discombobulated again. Aaron Dotson is out um, for this week. He's getting a test run at the doctor. So keep him in your prayers over that. That's all I'll say. I'll let him choose what information to or not to divulge. But this is Christianity Now. Christianity Now is the podcast where we like to think about current events, things that the church is facing. And I've got a few things to talk about. This is not going to be like an hour and a half long podcast where we're all on the same topic all the time. This would be just me sitting down and talking, and we're going to talk a little bit about scruples, Christians and Halloween. We're going to talk about just how much can humans manipulate the weather acutely. How much can they manipulate the weather acutely? And then we'll consider whether or not that has some larger ramifications. And then I found this interesting meme that I want to share with you about voting and how much to vote or how to vote, how to figure out who you're voting for. And it's very interesting that all of the political talking points, all the things that you would use to figure out who to vote for and who not to, somebody just took it and put Bible verses with it. So I think it's very interesting. If you are just joining in, it does take a minute to build our audience. I plan on, if we have good comments or if we have comments today, which we don't always have comments, I'll try to focus more on the comments today. I feel like something is off. Do y'all feel like something is off? Maybe it's just because Aaron's not here and I feel, but usually we've got folks in, we've got folks commenting. We got at least one or two that jumps in and says good morning. Oh well. We shall live. We just had a jump in viewership, so maybe that's folks starting to realize that we're live and it's time to, or it's the show started. Folks are coming in. As you're coming in, just give us a comment or something. Tell us how you're doing. Let us know you're there. So first off, I wanna start off with this little meme that well, you know what? I can't show it to. I should just show it to you, screen share it, but I don't know where to find it on this computer. I saved it on this computer. Oh well. Good morning, everybody. Sandra Goodwin. Good morning, Terry Crooks. Good morning to you. And again, I just feel discombobulated. That's all I can say. Morning, Danny Mentor, Brandon Wild. Yeah, we got started. We got folks rolling in now. Um, yeah, I'm just, I'm going to chalk it up. The reason I'm discombobulated, I'm going to chalk it up to Aaron not being here. All right. How I will vote in November. Now, there's one here that is, well, let's just scrutinize them. I will vote for the most pro-life candidate because God hates the shedding of innocent blood. Proverbs 6:17. Pretty good. I get it. It's, if you're going to be a one-issue voter, make it the issue of abortion and vote for the candidate that's going to at least cause a little friction around that. I will vote for the most pro-Israel candidate because God blesses those who bless Israel and curses those who don't. Genesis 12:3. Yeah, I don't agree with that one. I think too much of our foreign policy is made based on a misunderstanding of eschatological dogmas. The doctrine of the end times, folks, is pretty clear. Jesus is going to come back. The earth is going to be destroyed. We're going to be in heaven for eternity. That's all there is to it. There's no, Israel's not owed any more land. In fact, I can give us a verse really quick. It's a one and done in my book. Joshua chapter 21. Yep. Starting in verse 43 of Joshua 21. And the Lord gave unto Israel all the land which he sware to give unto their fathers, and they possessed it and dwelt therein. And the Lord gave them rest round about according to all that he sware unto their fathers, and there stood not a man of all their enemies before them. The Lord delivered all their enemies into their hand. There failed not aught of any good thing which the Lord had spoken unto the house of Israel. All came to pass. Now read that and ask yourself, does God owe Israel any more land? The answer is no. All came to pass. The promise has been fulfilled. So I don't think we need to vote or make foreign policy or anything based on a faulty eschatological conclusion, because it's just wrong. Now, you could say, I will vote for the most pro-Israel candidate because they are our allies surrounded by enemies. Like, we can have a conversation about that, but that conversation is a little bit more subjective. We don't need to make decisions based on premillennialism, because premillennialism has been proven to be bunk. All right. I vote for the most pro-debt reduction candidate because the borrower is slave or servant to the lender, Proverbs 22:7. That's a good one. I vote for the most pro-work candidate because God says if a man won't work, let him not eat, 2 Thessalonians 3:10. That's a good one. I will vote for the most pro-marriage candidate because God is for marriage as defined in Genesis 2:24 and Matthew 19 and others. That's it. Do you know which party to vote for based on these statements? There's only one party that fits it. I will vote for the candidate who most closely believes the government's purpose is to reward good and punish evil, Romans 13. I will vote based as close as I can on God's word, 2 Timothy 3:16. Folks, this is all there is to it. You know exactly. If you vote with this guide, you're going to vote Republican down the line, down ticket. It's just all there is to it. And quite frankly, for somebody to say that that is wrong, that's gaslighting. It's kind of a crude thing to say, but don't pee on my head and tell me it's raining. Vote accordingly. Just look at the Democratic Party platforms, or the Democratic Party platform, all of the bullet points, all the talking points. Look at all the talking points for the Republican Party platform and vote according with your conscience, if you've got one. If you've got a conscience and you value Judeo-Christian values any at all, there's only one vote that you can cast this November. That's all I'm going to say about that. We need to vote and make policies that benefit our country and people. You got that right. We need to learn to mind our own business when it comes to other countries, not just our government, but our people. We don't owe another country anything except possibly humanitarian aid if they ask for it. True. We need to vote. Yeah, I worked for 35 years and now I'm disabled. Will God not like that? No, he'll like it just fine. I mean, you worked 35 years and it happens that you you could be disabled because of your own fault, but we'll just say this: despite your best efforts, you're disabled. Well, there's charity. God extols the virtue and commands even charity. But if you're not willing to do anything, you have to do everything that you're able to do. You don't have to do anything more than you're able to do, but you have to do all you're able to do. That principle is found in, is it Luke chapter 14? Somebody needs to look that up. I can't remember off the top of my head. The Mary and her alabaster box. She break that alabaster box of ointment, anointed the head and feet of Jesus. Judas got mad and been like, well, this money, you could have sold that to give the money to the poor. It's a $40,000 bottle of perfume, for crying out loud. Well, this he said because he held the money bag. He was embezzling. But Jesus defended Mary and said, let her alone. She's done what she could. That's it. That's what you're required to do. You're disabled. You're required to do what you're able to do. God understands that. So if you're disabled, but you can still do something, then you're required to do that by God. But there are charities, there's your local community. That's why it's so important to be involved in the community. Because when you get old, when you get disabled, if you ever have an accident where you're crippled, you want people around you to take care of you. The verse of scripture that was cited, if a man doesn't work, neither should he eat, from the letter to the church of Thessalonica, that the implication there, if a man doesn't work, neither should he eat, that's if a man is capable of working, is the idea. Even widows, the church was not supposed to become a welfare situation for widows. You had to be a widow indeed, which you had to be above 60 years old, and you had to have no family to be able to take care of you. If you were a widow indeed, above 60, good rapport, no family to take care of you, then you still had to work for the church. You still had to have a ministry. You had to have a job. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question. I make hats, so I still work at my own pace. That's it. That's anybody that would be fool enough to say, well, the Bible says you don't work, neither should you eat, and you're supposed to work, provide for your family. A fellow that doesn't provide for his own is worse than an infidel. All you got to do is say, I do everything that I can. I make hats and I sell hats. I can only do so much. I work at my own pace. That's it. That's your defense. You don't have to say another word. Let me make sure I didn't miss any. Yeah, okay, we got the comments. Good deal. Thank you for that, Brandon Wild. Good comment there. Good question. I worked for 35 years. Now I'm disabled. Will God not like that? Well, God don't like the fact that you're disabled. I think I used a weird turn of phrase whenever I read that comment. But yeah, God's not going to like the fact that you're disabled, but that's because God don't like seeing his children suffer. But he knows people suffer on the earth. Do what you can. That's the ticket. Now, before we get into the final segment, I want to talk about. I'm gonna share my screen here, and I'm hoping that we can hear this. Is what I'm hoping. But this is about the conversation we had about the weather not too long ago. This is 90 seconds long. I don't know. I guess I could just let it run. This is 90 seconds long. I'm going to let her run until I feel like I can't let her run. I don't want to get copyright struck. But remember, the conspiracy theorist is that the government can acutely control the weather to the point where they can control tornadoes and hurricanes. Okay, we don't have enough information to have that conversation. However, when you see stuff like this, perhaps the government agencies or private entities like BlackRock and some of these other multi-gajillion dollar entities, corporations, maybe they've got stuff that we can't even fathom. Just think about that. Now, watch this. And I remember learning about these machines, but it sounded so made up I didn't want to say anything until I had proof. Well, lo and behold, here's proof.
Michigan, and I'm with Mr. Chris Croft. So what is behind us here?
Oh, it's a hail cannon. We've had it at least 10 years, maybe 15.
Now notice,
And that we have it running. And
notice he said it's a hail cannon. Can y'all hear that, by the way? I really hope you can hear it. If you can't hear it, it's going to be awful funny. I'm going to wait about another 5 seconds before I go play it again, and you let me know whether or not you can hear it. I'm not getting any feedback, so evidently you can. Okay, yes, good. Thank you. All right, I'm just going to go back to playing her. Now just listen to what this hail cannon does. Now think about if you got to sell an apple with no blemishes and a piece of hail hits it, that's going to blemish that apple. So that apple, your crop's ruined. Growing up in the apple business in the 80s, we had probably 3 or 4 years out of the decade of the 80s that we had hail ruin a large swath of our crop of apples. We couldn't sell number 1 apples. We could sell number 2s. We could sell what's referred to as kind of like culls. But, of course, they don't command as high a price. Our crop was ruined. Luckily, we got some some disaster relief from the government for a few of those years. Maybe all of them. I can't remember. But anyway, just listen and ask yourself, if this technology is so readily available and affordable that a private person with a apple orchard, an apple farm, could afford this, and it's simple enough to maintain that he's had it for 10 or 15 years. I can't remember what he said. What do you think people with multiplied tens of billions of dollars have access to? And what do you think the large term what do you think the effect of it is, large scale?
sometimes we haven't had it run, we've had a little hail.
It's very sunny today, but usually you light it off when it's cloud cover.
Stormy.
And the threat of a storm,
Yep.
and it's supposed to prevent hail, because hail can cut up your fruit, mark up your fruit, totally ruin your crop.
A subsonic ring that goes up, hail forms about 40,000 feet, and we can.
It's a subsonic ring. The hail goes up, forms about 40,000 feet. So what happens is this subsonic or supersonic, whatever it is, this sonic ring goes up and it messes with the atmosphere and disperses the hailstorm. Oh, really? You don't say. What in the world do you think is the unforeseen consequence of that? Nature is all about balance. You don't disperse a hailstorm over your fields without mucking about with something else miles and miles away. All right. Now let me play the rest of this.
And actually go up in the clouds and disperse that hail before it forms, or moisture, and hopefully protect the crop.
We're going to go light it off, right?
Yeah, we can actually poke a hole in the radar, actually.
Do you hear what he's saying? Yeah, we can actually poke a hole in the radar. I don't even know what that means. But this is a pretty traumatic event for the atmosphere above this deal. And I hope this music is playing in the background. Don't get me in trouble.
I can show you pictures of that if you want.
Okay, let's do it.
It'll actually fire about every 3 seconds.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I'll step back.
So stand back and we'll let her rip.
First got the cannon, we would actually call our local sheriff's office, let them know that we had a threat of hail and that we would be lighting off our hail cannon, and then, the dispatchers would be like, well, what is that? We really want to make sure our neighbors understand what we're doing. If we're stopping the hail here on our farm, we're also stopping it from hitting their homes, hitting their cars. And
Do you see what you just said? If we're stopping the hail on our farms, we're stopping the hail on other people's, on our neighbors. You can't mess with the weather and localize it. Again, the butterfly effect. The idea of the butterfly effect is a butterfly flaps its wings in southern Sri Lanka, and on the other side of the world, a tidal wave hits shore and kills 20,000 people. These kind of things are studied. The hurricane, Helene. How far, if we were omniscient and could know everything, how far could we trace that hurricane back to its minuscule, almost, well, seemingly innocuous origin? It could have had an origin just like this, where somebody with the best intentions in the world tried to seed a cloud or tried to shoot subsonic rings into the atmosphere to break something up. So while it is true, yes, I do not believe that quote-unquote governments or some nefarious abstract entity referred to as them or they has a weapon that they can shoot into the clouds and send a tornado or a hurricane after you. But if you don't think what we're doing is messing with the weather, you just aren't paying attention. And again, this right here, they have a machine that is affordable, that is simple enough to maintain, that they've had it for 1.5 decades. And it's dependable enough, and it does what's advertised on the tin well enough that it's worth the expense to have and maintain. It affects the weather. It affects the weather over these people's farm with the surrounding area of effect. Now, do you think they're the only ones who have this? This potentially isn't even the only one on their farm. We had about 300 acres of apples growing up. We could have used about 4 of them. Just something to think about. All right. Now, good morning. Yeah, good deal. So we could hear that. Good morning, John Exum. Hey, Alabama. If we have 3 or 4 states that made it illegal to spray chemtrails across their state, guess what that means? They're admitting what it is out loud that they and the government knows it. Absolutely, yes. Well, that's so. This has come out in a recent interview with J.D. Vance and some woman on some news station. This shows you the left's progression. First off, no, roving gangs of immigrants are not taking over anything or doing anything in any of these cities. Oh, well, wait, in this city in Colorado, you have an apartment building has been taken over. We know this for a fact. It's incontrovertible. The right says this is problems with immigration. The left says, no, it's not. But if it were, it wouldn't be a big problem. Why are you even messing with it? Now they've progressed to the next stage. You're right. It is happening. But it's not that big a deal, and you shouldn't be bothered by it. It's the gaslighting. That woman on that J.D. Vance interview had the nerve, the temerity to say, it's just a handful of buildings. Just one is enough. Well, right here. All right. Human beings possess within themselves at a very large scale level. It's very easy to get technology that controls the weather. To say that it is outside the realm of possibility to control the weather enough to cause, with some certainty, a major catastrophic calamitous event. That's just naivety. That's denying what you can plainly see. Here we have an apple farm with a device that is powerful enough to stop a hailstorm. And that's owned by a little farmer in Michigan. What do you think somebody like Elon Musk or George Soros or Amazon, Jeff Bezos, what do you think some of these people have access to? What do you think BlackRock has access to? Things that we don't even know about. So again, yeah, just because we can doesn't mean we should. That's it. I like my tinfoil hat. It's not rusty. I keep it shined up. If I'm wrong about something, then I'm wrong. Otherwise, I'm spreading the missing information. John Exum, it began over. I don't understand what you mean by that. I don't think you understand how weather works, John. The hurricane could begin over water, but could be started in the middle of the Sahara Desert. That's how weather works. That doesn't mean anything. It started over water just like any other hurricane. So, like yes, that doesn't mean anything. I guess I'm not paying attention because I don't believe everything I hear and see on the internet. You understand that with that comment, you're kind of saying that I do. Like that's that comment that I guess I'm not paying attention because I remember what I said. I said, if you think that the human beings cannot control the weather with if you think human beings don't possess the ability to control the weather acutely with the ability, I think I said something to that effect, to cause a large-scale calamitous weather event, then you're not paying attention. You're denying what is easily seen by everyone. And that's when you put that comment there, I don't believe everything I hear and see on the internet. I don't believe it either. But the problem is I do look. And I'm telling you, human beings possess the ability and technology to control the weather. Now, that doesn't mean that you've got some kind of government entity with a ray gun like a hurricane gun. But again, you could disrupt the atmosphere potentially in the middle of the Sahara Desert and cause a tidal wave on the other side of the earth. That's just how weather works. Give me Bear Independence video this morning and listen to. It's not about the weather, it's about the relief efforts. Very eye-opening. Yeah. Yep. Texas put a stop to that in their state, even got one of the gang leaders in jail now. That's very good. Don't think so well of Elon. He's all about hooking you up to the hive. Oh, yeah, the Starlink. Yeah, Starlink. And John says, I'm sorry for that comment. It was on emotion. I will delete it. Well, I mean, you ain't got to delete it if you don't want to. I'm just showcasing what it was. And that's what the program is for, to bring information. And again, I've been on this earth even without this video. I knew these things were out there. They just sounded so fantastical that I couldn't even speak about them unless I had the proof, and I didn't want to say anything unless I could point to them. What about all the fires? Most are man-made. Yeah, so that's another thing. People, like, there were some fires and stuff recently in Canada that, and there's a lot of strange stuff around the fires that was in Hawaii. Y'all, if you don't think that these large entities with, I don't think you understand when I say you, I me too. I don't think we can fathom exactly how much assets BlackRock has. So think about this. If you and I wanted to go purchase a house, and all of the houses in the neighborhood were $1 million houses, and all the people that were in the neighborhood were owed money, like generational, what would be the easiest thing to do in order to purchase the land and the houses? And you might not be able to purchase the houses. You might only be able to purchase the land. Now, what do I mean by that? You got to think like somebody that's above the law, and it has access to multiplied tens of billions of, they have access to multiplied trillions of dollars, okay? What you could do if you were BlackRock is you could go around that entire neighborhood and set fires, drive all of the people out, all of the devastation, make it to where the only reasonable way to come back and rebuild would be way more money than it's worth. So now all of that property is for sale, and as an entity, you just go in there and buy it all. Now you can eat all of that cost, and you can reabsorb it, and your plan is over a century, not over a couple of decades. So you can absorb all of that cost into 100 to 200 years of business plan and business model. And now BlackRock owns everything. Look at what happened in Hawaii. Look at about all of those private houses and stuff like that people had been holding on to for generations. Now the bank owns, or BlackRock owns, or the government owns, because the fires there displaced everybody to the point that they couldn't afford to go back and rebuild. The only thing they could do is sell, and BlackRock and those other entities was there to pick it up. Now they can go rent those places that they used to own for about twice what a mortgage payment would be. Lasers, yeah. So that's what got Marjorie Taylor Greene in trouble. There is technology available to man where you can, from satellite, from outer space, start a forest fire. Whether or not they used it is a different story. We don't know that, and probably they didn't. It defies Occam's razor. If the government wanted to start a fire and mess with everybody, it'd be easier just to go send people in there and start it. California has regulations against undergrowth burning and therefore has the most wildfires because of it. Yes. Is that not crazy? That seems so counterintuitive. Get it on all those old growth forests, get in there and clean up that undergrowth. Because what happens is a forest in its natural maturing will grow, it'll build undergrowth, a fire will come along, the oldest trees will survive the fire, the younger trees and the undergrowth will be burned off, and that's how you get these beautiful forests that don't have a lot of undergrowth. Well, if you don't ever let the forest fires burn, and if you artificially lower the frequency of the forest fires, you also artificially raise the intensity of the forest fires. That's why the forest fires are so bad when they do happen. They're so hard to deal with. All right. Can these fires affect the weather? Well, yes. Anything, John, that goes up into the atmosphere affects the weather. Just like a pinch of salt in in some cake batter will affect that cake batter. Go look up cookies. You can see where certain like you have all these cookies, these chocolate chip cookies, and each chocolate chip cookie has something wrong with it. This chocolate chip cookie has more baking soda. This chocolate chip cookie has too much sugar. This chocolate chip cookie has too much egg. This chocolate chip cookie has whatever. And it's very interesting that just a slight deviation of the ratio of ingredients in a chocolate chip cookie is enough to radically change the texture and the taste of the chocolate chip cookie. It's the same way with the weather. You don't have to do a lot to mess with the weather. Think about an avalanche. It's very easy to start an avalanche. It would be very easy to create a calamitous weather event. I don't know. I'm speaking as if that's some kind of esoteric jargon. I don't know, but I'm just saying. Just think of a hurricane like Katrina. It would be very easy to trigger a catastrophic event like that. The real power, and this is what humans hadn't figured out yet. The real power is stopping the major catastrophic weather event. But you can start one pretty easy, just like you can start an avalanche pretty easy. All you got to do with an avalanche is just go to the top of the mountain and holler. Stomp your feet. You got an avalanche. Stopping the avalanche is where the real power is. All right. If so, then that would prove that man can and does affect weather. Just thought of that myself. Yeah, like I said, the fact that man can affect weather, it is incontrovertible. Man affects the weather. We know man affects the weather. Man has been affecting the weather by what we can see. Just in our lifetimes. We know this. Yeah, which would eliminate any argument I had against it. Wildfires can impact weather and the climate by releasing large quantities of carbon dioxide, monoxide, and fine particulate matter into the atmosphere. I just destroyed my own thoughts on the subject. Now, think about this. If it is the case that a wildfire can affect the weather and the climate by releasing large quantities of carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and fine particulate, this is what the people in Dubai do. They release carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and fine particulate into the air. The United States has been doing it. The Arab Emirate is not the only person that's been doing this. The United States has been doing this forever. They seed the clouds. It's called cloud seeding. And when it works, it always works way more than you'd really want it to work. That's the thing. The government isn't allowed to own property. Why do they? Ignorance of the population. That's why. Hey, I'd have to chew on that. Does the government... You wrinkle my brain, hey. So, since wildfires affect weather, man affects weather even through starting wildfires. I mean, yeah. But that also means when I smoked a brisket for Canadian Thanksgiving. I smoked that brisket for like 15 hours. I affected the weather. It was minuscule. I might not have affected the weather where you could ascertain the effect of it, but I affected it. That's it. You never know how this stuff starts or where it's going to go. If you prevent fires, you have to take so many boards out a year or a kinder box or a kinder box. Brandon Wild? I do not know that reference. Danny Mentor, John Exum. So these podcasts had a thought-provoking impact on me as well, which is why I enjoy listening, being involved in discussion. Thank you. I'm just trying not to give any foothold to non-Christians who would use the arguments to say there is no God because man can control and dominate the weather, or to that effect. I want to give all control to God. That's just me personally. Well, yeah, but that to acknowledge a truth is not relinquishing, or is not wresting control from God, though. I mean, man controls the. Of course, we could control the weather. God has given this creation into our stewardship. We can do anything that we can do. Like, we can't violate the laws of physics. If we could violate the laws of physics, we would be God. Yeah, it is controlled by God, yet can be manipulated by man. Not started to control, just manipulated. Yeah, and that's the thing. People who say, well, man can control the weather, and even I've been saying it. Y'all, let me. Man cannot control the weather. Man can influence the weather. Man can alter the weather. Man can even influence and alter with some semblance of control, not because man has the power to control, but man can look at God's creation and ascertain a flow chart of cause and event, cause and effect. So when I say that man can control the weather to the point where even a hurricane could happen, I don't mean that they have a button for hurricane and they shoot something into the water or the air or whatever, and there's a hurricane. I'm saying that meteorologists, astrophysicists, physicists, other scientists, marine biologists, that wouldn't work. Anyway, oceanographers, people, all these scientists can come together and they know cause and effect because they've witnessed it. So they know about what to do if we throw all this particulate and this gas up in the atmosphere in these 5 locations, and then we have this huge subsonic boom to stir everything in this location. We know that this hurricane season coming up in 3 months is going to be really, really bad. Now, we don't know where the hurricanes are going to be. We don't know where landfall. They could peter out before they get to the land. But we have affected hurricane season, and we know that based on what we've observed in the past, through cause and effect, through observing God's creation, we know that these hurricanes are either going to be more frequent or more powerful or both. Now, that's very nuanced. So a much easier thing to do is they're controlling the hurricanes. Anyway. Boop. Cleaning up. Hold on a second. Excuse me. Cleaning up brush by burning it isn't the problem. Lightning strikes causes fires. It's the manipulation of it that's the problem. Yeah. And Danny Mentor gave me an amen, brother. John X was okay, now I'm with you. I should have asked for you to define your terms, silly me. That would have solved my quandary. True. I can see why people use the verse, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. It can apply to so many topics. God expects us to learn many things. Bible heroes learn many subjects. True that as well. We should broaden our own horizons as well. It's not dangerous to know a little bit about many subjects. True. So, again, no. There are no Jewish people with satellites that have space lasers causing forest fires. There's no cabal with a weather machine that they can program to send a tornado after you or a hurricane. But this technology exists where we can somewhat manipulate the weather to meet a minimum reasonable threshold of being able to say we're controlling the weather. And the technology does exist that from a space satellite, you could heat up matter on the surface of the earth to the point where, given the right conditions, you could make a fire. That's a far stretch from putting on a tinfoil hat saying, hey, you know, they're turning the frogs gay, Sandy Hook didn't happen, and I communed with space aliens from another dimension who were demons when I ate the mushrooms. Anyway. Oh, yes, 1.08 followers on YouTube. Thank you so much. That is so awesome to me. Boy, I wish Aaron was here. And incidentally, this Saturday, we're going to have the 1,000 subscriber giveaway. It's going to be a Bible. I'll put the, where's my live stream? Christianity Now. I hope my live stream. Oh, there it is. Start to say if my live stream wasn't here, that would explain a lot as to why. As to why it took a minute to get a crowd gathered. Yes, thank you, Hey Hey Alabama. So, Hey Hey Alabama on YouTube, there's 9 watching, but only 2 thumbs up. Here's what you have to do on YouTube if you really want to help us out, is back out of the live stream chat. And when your screen looks like it looks without the live stream chat, give it a thumbs up from there. That's a permanent thumbs up. That's not just with the oh, come on, Tony. That's not just with the live stream. It would make sense when man tries to create, affect, manipulate weather for God to allow it to go further than man would think it would to show man what he should not mess with. It's God's order. Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? That's the problem. That's why in Dubai they're having all this problem, is because they've done this for so many years. Figuratively, the chickens are coming home to roost, as it were. You and me both. Danny Mentor says, watching meteorologists eat their words is one of my guilty pleasures. Incidentally, and I'm right there with you, but I will speak in defense of meteorologists. Bear with me. It takes a drink of coffee before I can defend meteorologists very heartily. Okay. The reason meteorologists have such a hard time is because the weather is so easily manipulated. See, that's the thing. When a meteorologist does a 24-hour forecast, they pretty spot on. But the farther they get from the present, the less sure their predictions are, because there's too many unforeseen variables. Like, for instance, today is Tuesday. Well, let's do a 7-day forecast. Tomorrow's going to be kind of overcast, probably going to be a little bit rainy. The cooler temperatures are starting to come in. So if I could look at all the barometric pressure and all the things going on in the world, I can extrapolate from what's happened in the last week, what can happen in the next week. Well, what happens if on the 7th day of the 7th-day forecast, I say, hey, it's going to be sunny and bright. It'll be a little chilly, but at least you're going to be bright and sunny. And then next thing you know, a cow kicks over a coil oil, or a cow kicks over one of those heaters that farmers sometimes use in a barn, and it sparks a fire that catches the woods on fire, and you got 3,000 acres of forest burned. And because of that, in New Brunswick, Canada, in Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada, it's raining like pouring pee out of a boot. Well, the poor old meteorologist, he didn't know that the cow was going to kick over a heater and cause a big fire. All right. But yes, it is it is somewhat satisfying whenever the meteorologists who are so sure, it's a little bit of a sadistic pleasure. I probably need to repent and come forward, but I do kind of like them watching. I do kind of like watching them eat a little bit of crow. All right. Let's talk about, really quickly, I want to bring this up, scruples, matters of judgment. This is the end of the show. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, but I do want to at least talk about it. For one, it was brought up Sunday in a very good way. We had a good conversation. Somebody asked, what do you advise about Halloween? These are people that are from the continent of Africa, and I'm just going to tell you, it hits different for them. It hits different. You shut your mouth, Brandon Wild. You got that just right. Satan is working overtime for sure. Bear with me just a second. Let me get these comments, and then once I clean these comments up, I'm gonna spend about 10, maybe 12 minutes on matters of judgment, Christians and Halloween, stuff like that. Well, why am I? Oh, right here. Our media isn't showing us what's going on around the world. Bad weather is everywhere. You got that right. I love James Spann. He's balanced and just tells it like it is. I've never heard of that man. Job lost everything because of the devil. Yes, he did. And yes, he did. Don't lay that at, I know you didn't. My tone is not affected. My tone is not directed at you, but it just struck me. Job lost everything, as you said, because of the devil, not because of God. Because of the devil. Now that's profound. Don't forget that. A lot of suffering can be laid at the feet of one particular entity. That entity is not God, it's the devil. Good comment, Brandon Wild. The Doppler radar is a program that they study that gives them an idea of what might be in store for us. Yes, they look at what's happened in the past and they extrapolate from that into the future. That's all it is. It's a really, really educated guess. A highly educated guess. But it's still an educated guess. That's right, Danny Mentor. Keep a diary of the weather in your area, what it's like from your observation, then what the weatherman says. From year to year, you'll have a record. Yes. Another good thing about that is another good resource. I couldn't think of the word resource, guys. Another good resource for that's the Farmer's Almanac, unless it's changed. Oh, who's that guy? James Spann evidently can tell you where all the barbecue joints are on the weather map in Alabama when pointing to where the tornadoes are. That's hilarious. Like in a non-ironic, like I'm not being, like that's hilarious in the best of ways. In the best of ways, it's hilarious. And yes, I've read this before. I'm going to read it again. Satan is working overtime. I know a man that keeps a journal of what trees bloom when the weather and such. Just little things, but it's a record that he reflects on from time to time. A lot of voodoo is okay, good. It looks like that we have changed in the comments. So I'm gonna read this comment, but then I'm gonna go into the material that I have for the next about 10 minutes, and then I'll get back to the comment section. A lot of voodoo is practiced in many foreign places, so Halloween hits different for them. Yes. And incidentally, just like Halloween hits different in the deep, deep recesses of Appalachia. In the deep, deep hills where I grew up, Halloween hits different. In the bayou in Louisiana, Halloween hits different. There's places in the United States, Halloween hits different. Here in New Brunswick, the Riverview Church of Christ, we cannot have a trunk or treat because it hits different up here. There are some of our members right now that probably couldn't deal with it. So we don't do it because we want to preserve their conscience. And so that's what I want to talk about very quickly. It was asked Sunday about Halloween, and that's what would you advise? And long story short, my advice is don't do anything that you think is wrong. Let me take a few minutes to explain that. I've got some notes here. Scruples, personal judgments is all they are. Matters of personal judgment. Scruples about right and wrong in situations where the Bible is silent. They're essential to Christian living. You know, in Acts chapter 17, where Paul says, in him we live and move and have our being, that's within God's boundaries of morality. Now, we're not told every single little bitty thing that we are or are not supposed to do. We are told generally how to behave, and from that we should extrapolate how to act. For instance, a good example of a scruple is when you go out to eat, do you pay attention to whether or not the restaurant serves alcohol? I know many for whom it would be sin for them to enter a restaurant and eat if that restaurant serves alcohol. They cannot in good conscience do it. That is a scruple. That's a matter of personal judgment. It is not a violation of God's law for you to go eat at a restaurant that also serves alcohol. There are some principles at play where I might be able to convince you that a Christian should not. But there is no book, chapter, and verse where I can prove to you that a Christian may not or cannot. They don't have permission. So, scruples. God's word provides commandments and principles, but believers encounter situations where no specific direct commands or directives exist, requiring the use of personal conscience and discernment. These are scruples. Scruples must be approached carefully to avoid division and maintain unity among believers. So, matters of liberty and judgment, all right? Paul addresses matters of liberty in Romans 14 and 1 Corinthians 8, and quite frankly, about half of 1 Corinthians 10. And it deals with disagreements over eating meat offered to idols and observing certain days. Romans 14:3 states, let not him that eateth despiseth him that eateth not, and let not him which eateth judge him that eateth. Let me reread that. Let not him that eateth despise him that eateth not, and let not him which eateth not judge him that eateth. For God hath received him. I still read that with the wrong vernacular. With the wrong, not vernacular, inflection. I just needed a grammar word. I just pulled out vernacular instead of inflection. Let not him that eateth despise him that eateth not, and let not him which eateth. Oh, that's where I'm getting wrong. And let not him which eateth not judge him that eateth, for God hath received him. If you eat, don't judge folks that don't eat. If you don't eat, don't judge folks that do. Believers are instructed not to judge or show contempt toward each other in matters of this personal judgment, where God has allowed liberty. Christians must refrain from imposing personal matters of scruple upon others where the Lord has not bound specific commands. So when it comes to matters of liberty, going into that restaurant that serves alcohol is a matter of liberty. What does your conscience dictate? That's the issue. Don't judge somebody that goes in there to eat if you think it's sinful, and don't judge somebody who don't go in there to eat if you don't think it's sinful. Yes. I still think I messed that up. Let's talk about the role of conscience, because the role of conscience is very important to understanding this. Conscience serves as an internal guide according to one's understanding of right and wrong. Yet, it must be trained. We have to study the Bible to show ourselves approved unto God, workmen that needeth not to be ashamed. We have to train our conscience. Romans 14:23 teaches, whatsoever is not of faith is sin. Now that doesn't mean that, well, if mechanical instruments of music is not of faith because it's not in the Bible, so therefore it's sin. Wrong. This is personal faith. If you cannot, in good faith, enter into that restaurant that serves alcohol, and you do, then to you it's sin, because you have gone against your personal faith. When believers violate their personal faith or their conscience by acting contrary to what they believe is right, the act becomes sin for them, even if the action itself is not inherently sinful. That's why my advice is, don't do anything you think is wrong. Acts 24:16 reads, and herein do I exercise myself to have always a conscience void of offense toward God and toward men. Live your life in that way. Christians must diligently train their conscience to align with the teachings of Scripture, ensuring that they live in good conscience with God and others. Now, how do we avoid division over matters of conscience and judgment? Well, let us therefore follow after the things which make for peace, and things wherewith one may edify another. Romans 14:19. You know what a really good way, and this is a difficult paradox for preachers, because preachers got to teach. And so I've got to teach publicly about these things. The problem is, when you go poking somebody's scruples, they get real stinking offended. And it just happens like that. And you've got to smooth it over. You got to have that confrontation. You got to smooth it over. You can be like, look, I understand that you feel strongly, but it's not ipso facto. It's not inherently sinful. The best thing to do is not talk about it. Talking about going to eat in a restaurant that serves alcohol. Back in Jonesboro, Arkansas, northeast Arkansas, I was in Bay, Jonesboro, Brooklyn, the surrounding area. There was a person that I would go out to eat with from time to time in our friend group. That person could not go into a restaurant that served alcohol and eat in good conscience. We never brought it up. We had about 3 restaurants around that we knew that this person liked, that we liked too, that also didn't serve alcohol. We just went to one of those 3 restaurants whenever he was with us. Didn't bat an eye, didn't say a word. Now, if we would have tried to show him in the Bible why it was okay for him to go into Applebee's and eat because it had a bar, we would have made an enemy out of him, because it's more than opinion, folks. You feel it so deep in your conscience. We would have been in sin. He would have been in sin. It'd been a mess. We'd have lost a friend. Just follow after the things which make for peace. Don't go to that. Don't try to force him to violate his scruple. Disputes over scruples destroy unity and detract from the church's mission. 1 Corinthians 8:9 warns, but take heed lest by any means this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to them that are weak. The King James says weak. Think about tender, these tender conscienced. The fellow that wouldn't go into the restaurant to eat because it served alcohol, he had a tender conscience. He was not weak, I promise you that. So even though liberty is granted in some areas, believers are required to exercise love by not causing others to stumble through their actions. Paul emphasizes this personal responsibility in 1 Corinthians 8:18. Listen to it. Wherefore, if meat make my brother to offend, I will eat no flesh while the world standeth, lest I make my brother to offend. That's offend the law, the law of his conscience. He would be in sin. Paul says, your salvation is important enough to me that I would deny myself certain liberties for your good. Christian liberty must be used with care and love to avoid leading others into sin and confusion. And I will say this, we also cannot allow some of these brethren who have these scruples to browbeat other brethren and tyrannically get their own way because of this idea that if meat were to make my brother to offend, I would eat no flesh while the world standeth. I've seen elderships run the congregation catering to the scrupulous whims of a small subset of the congregation. That cannot be allowed to happen. That's called the tyranny of the weaker brother. And in teaching about this, one person in one of my classes frustratingly said, well, if two people are having a disagreement then based on scruple, who gets to decide? And I'm like, how long you been in the church? The elders get to decide. The elders rule in matters of expediency, in matters of scruple. In lieu of elders, the congregation as a whole. It is the case that the Riverview Church of Christ had elders. The Riverview Church of Christ could say, listen, the elders could say, listen, we're going to have a trunk or treat, and we're going to do this as a evangelistic edification tool, but also as a teaching tool. I don't know that I would agree with that, but it would be within their power to do. You may say, well, that's lording your authority over the congregation. From a certain perspective, you'd be right. From a certain perspective, the elders are responsible for teaching. If they feel that this teaching is needed, they're within their right, whether or not I would agree with it or not. Let's talk about bearing one another in love. Romans 15:1 and 2. We then that are strong ought to bear the scruples, the New King James says, of the weak, and not to please ourselves. Let every one of us please his neighbor for his good and edification. Mature Christians are called to bear with those who struggle. If you're struggling with scruples, you need a good, mature Christian friend. And that friend in that area needs to place your needs above their own preferences. The goal is mutual edification, focusing on building one another up rather than insisting on personal freedoms. Bear ye one another's burdens, Galatians 6:2, and so fulfill the law of Christ. We have to think of other above self. And incidentally, that doesn't mean we're getting left out in the cold, because everybody that's around us is thinking of us above themselves. So somebody should be thinking about you higher than you're thinking about yourself, or a group of somebodies. That's how the church is supposed to work. So bearing one another's burdens involves understanding the scruples of others and acting with love, building unity within the church. Jesus' prayer for unity is simple: that they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me. John 17:21. Unity is strengthened when believers bear with one another in love. They understand, they hold space. They don't insist that their scrupulous beliefs are made mainstream. And also, the people who don't have such scruples, they don't insist that their way is adopted to the hurt of those who have the scruples. Scruples arise in areas where God's word is silent, restoring or requiring believers to exercise judgment shaped by conscience. Romans 14:23 emphasizes the importance of living out your beliefs, the action you take based on what you believe personally. And I'll give you an example of this. One of the men in the congregation, whenever I was answering the question about Halloween, they made several points from principles in Scripture and applied them to Halloween. That's their prerogative and their right. I did point out that everything they said could equally be applied to the celebration of birthdays. we had a good conversation about that collectively in the class. It's like, just don't do what you think is wrong. If you think it's wrong, don't do it. And allow other people to have that control over their own lives. You see, the gentleman who spoke up, the action he takes based on what he believes is abstinence from all things pertaining to Halloween. That's the only conclusion he can draw in good conscience. We have to respect that. If he participates in Halloween, he will be acting in a manner that would be commensurate with Romans 14:23. Whatsoever is not of faith. Dressing up and going trick-or-treating with his children is not of faith. Therefore, to him it is sin. That's how it works. So Christians must honor their own conscience, but without judging others in areas of liberty. And this ensures that scruples do not cause division in the church. Colossians 3:14 teaches, above all things, put on charity, which is the bound or the bond of perfectness, the boundary of perfectness. Love binds believers together, allowing them to navigate scruples and with wisdom and grace. Endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace, Ephesians 4:3. We have to do this. A balanced approach to scruples fosters peace and unity in the church, enabling believers to live faithfully in service to God and one another. So, whenever I think about Halloween, I will tell you what we did whenever we had children young enough to participate. We just didn't let them dress up in things demonic. Other than that, we let them have the innocent fun. And I understand how silly that sounds. And I admit that it is a little silly. I mean, dressing up as Thor from the Avengers theologically has got to be on the same level as dressing up as the devil. But just one hits us different. So we decided nothing demonic. All right. Let's go through the comment sections and then we'll be done. Bear with me. Yeah, my favorite saying is the devil is in the details. There are absolutely things that happen with Halloween that, Christian, you need to avoid. And I'm not talking about a man named Christian. I'm talking about if you profess to be a Christian, there's some things about Halloween you need to run far away from. And as Danny Mentor says, the devil's in the details. We give a lot of credit to God for doing things he didn't do. You got that right. Roger Chambers spoke on his Malawi mission, and he mentioned voodoo as yes, it is. I have yet to meet someone from the continent of Africa that did not believe in the occult, in witches and wizardry and demons and demon possession, river spirits, tree spirits, stuff like that. I didn't know Roger was battling lung cancer. No Halloween at my house. We will be deer hunting. I'm going to be passing out candy. I love passing out candy to little children. He spake at the World Mission Program seminar this past weekend. Gotcha. My children were afraid of Halloween when they were little, and we didn't do it. It's meant to scare them like that. We don't have any tricks or treaters where we live anyway. Yeah. So it's a moot point, isn't it right? It's inconsequential to you. It is where your heart is. Halloween can help pass the good news as well. True. Yeah, you can hand out with your candy. You can put in little Riverview, or you can put in invitations or whatever. I don't care for the holiday, so I don't participate. But if you wish to participate, it's not my business, and I don't fault anyone for it. It's a pretty healthy attitude, which is why the world tells us to be careful not to make judgment for ourselves that goes above what God has told us. And I said world, which is why the word The word, he means the word of God, tells us to be careful not to make judgment for ourselves that goes above what God has told us. The word says God will hold us to our judgment, even though his word does not dictate what we have put on ourselves. That's always scared me a little bit. Listen, Matthew chapter 7, 1 and following, judge not that you be not judged, because the judgment that you judge somebody else with is the level of judgment you're going to be judged with on the day of judgment. That's scary. That's why, for those of you who've been listening to me a long time, can y'all believe that I've been accused of being a liberal and cowardly because I won't come out and stand against sin? I'm like, look, I will stand against sin. If I'm convinced that somebody's in the wrong, you ain't big enough to stop me from saying something about it. But if I don't think they're in the wrong, even if I don't agree with what they did, if the Bible doesn't condemn them, then I don't either. Because I do not want to have any extra condemnation coming my way on the day of judgment. If I'm going to be in error, I would rather be in error for being too lax with my judgment and have to throw myself at the mercies of my master to obtain the grace for salvation on the last day. I would much rather be there than to be judged with my own level of mercy and grace. Oof, scary. Don't take the recovering alcoholic to a restaurant that has a bar. You'll be enticing him to want another drink. Wise. I used to preach at a church that covered the communion with a white cloth because the body of Christ should not be uncovered. I never said anything about it. If that is how they honor him, fine. Absolutely. And here's the thing. It's not that you couldn't say anything. If you had developed a relationship with them and a rapport with them over the course of many years, you would be able to say something about that. But let's say I was invited down there to hold a gospel meeting. I'm not going to say anything about it at all. I haven't developed a relationship with these people. I haven't purchased the right to be able to talk to them about it. The devil fashions himself as an angel of light, though, so a wholesome costume could be as well. That's why it's a little silly, right? You know, yes, it's with that way of thinking, which is a perfectly reasonable way of thinking. A costume of Thor and Iron Man would be just as demonic as the costume of the devil himself. And I actually like the macabre only because of the skulls. Yes. From a very early age, I understood what memento mori was. It means remember to die. And that's why a lot of the quote unquote Shakespearean age things, they have a lot of skulls. The macabre, I don't know how to pronounce that word. Macabre. Anyway. Having a skull or having some memento of death reminded you that you have an appointment with death and every day could be your last. So memento mori means remember death or remember to die, remember death. The idea is if you're always remembering that your life is finite, then you're going to take advantage of every day that you have. Memento mori. We used to be a foster family for black cats every Halloween. Apparently, they were especially endangered around Halloween. I wonder why. I mean, I know why. I'm not wondering why you would have fostered them. I wonder why they're endangered. People do rituals. Yeah, give trick-or-treaters info about the church with the candy. Now don't shaft them on the candy gold trap. You wrap that church bulletin around your Snickers bar or something. Sorry, I tickled me. All right. I've heard the opposite. I've heard you're legalistic. You split churches. We can cuss, etc. I know better. Oh yeah, there's two. Yeah, there's two extremes there. I'm legalistic. I'm unrelenting. You can't argue with me. I split churches, all that good stuff. The funny thing is, the people that say I split the churches, they're the people that are not doing what God wants them to do. When you practice church discipline, it's not a split, folks. I'm much more afraid of an angel of light more than make-believe. Yeah. Well, how many people? 180,000 woke up dead because of one angel. Folks, I went longer today than I intended. It would have been a much better show with Aaron Dotson here. But hopefully he's doing well. We want him to recuperate. I'm going to, as I'm closing things out, I'm going to put a couple of links in the show notes, in the comment section. I don't know why. I shared the wrong link in the comment section. I meant to share this one. So in the comment section, there's a link to a YouTube video where Aaron Dotson, well, thank you, Brandon Wild, appreciate you. There's a link where Aaron Dotson reviewed this New King James Premier Goatskin Bible. That's the one we're going to be giving away this Saturday. I'm not sure exactly the time. I got to touch base with Aaron for that. But it'll be 7 or 8 o'clock Central Standard Time of the evening. Pray for my dad. His name is Pete. He's having trouble making up his mind on whether or not to stay with my brother or myself. Well, we'll definitely keep Pete in our prayers, and I pray. I almost was doing a tongue twister. We will definitely keep Pete in our prayers, and we will pray that he comes to a decision that is good for all. All right. Folks, we're going to shut her down. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Tony Brewer with Christianity Now without Aaron Dotson. I mean, is it Christianity Now without Aaron Dotson? I know it's Cogitations because I'm by myself all the time. But anyway, Christianity Now. We hope that you like, subscribe, and share on the Christianity Now streams. We hope that you go to Substack and avail yourself of all the articles written there. I think that I shared the article on human law and God's will. If not, I'm just going to drop it again. It don't cost a dime to add another link. So check out all that. If you want to support us monetarily, that's Substack's best way to do it, unless you do it through Patreon. www.patreon.com/Christianity Now. You can do that for $1 a month. Substack is $5 a month. If you're a Patreon supporter and you don't have access to the material behind the paywall on Substack, send a message to www.christianityisnow@gmail.com. www.christianityisnow@gmail.com. And incidentally, you can do that for show topics and Bible questions or any questions at all. You can send that email. We also have a P.O. Box. P.O. Box 99900, HR 567 317, RPO Mountain Road, Moncton. If you want that, you can email me and I'll send it to you. But that's if you want to send us a care package or anything like that. But if you'll send an email to christianityisnow@gmail.com, I'll send you the P.O. Box. Other than that, tip jar, because some of you ask, nearchurches@gmail.com is our tip jar. You can send us a monetary donation there. But other than that, that's all we've got. God bless you. Be sure and subscribe to Cogitations, Christianity Now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and Podbean. Just go wherever you listen to podcasts and type Cogitations. That's all we've got, folks. God bless every one of you. This has been Tony Brewer with Christianity Now, and we'll